internal subjective experiences, there's a shift happening where there's a lot more credibility being given to those. And you've been, I have to say, one of the people who has really spearheaded this in the culture. So let's talk about that a little bit for a minute.
The shift from the traditional stage to the rational stage is indeed a shift from essentially taking a second-person perspective, which means you're ethnocentric in your perspectives and your identity, to a third person, which means you open up to universal truths, and you judge people regardless of race, color, sex, or creed. And it was that the emergence of that stage of development in a 100-year period, the rational stage of development completely outlawed and banned slavery from every rational industrial country on the face of the planet. It's the first time in history that slavery had been outlawed by any societal type. You find slavery in tribal, horticultural, agrarian societies. But because of the third-person, world-centric fairness found in the rational stage of development, things like slavery were outlawed. Things like feminism came into existence, all during about that 100-year period in the 1800s. And one of the interesting things is that it started out, and it was an increase in capacity for introspection. At a scientific level, was an increase in capacity for turning within, looking within, exploring within. That's one of the reasons things like psychoanalysis was invented during those periods. And then something happened starting right around the 1900s, and it's about 1920 in this country. We got a complete, what I call flatland approach, which is that science stopped looking inward and began looking only outwardly. And that is a disaster. The last great psychologist in this country to write about inward states of consciousness was, of course, William James, who was just a genius.
That was 100 years ago.
It was 100 years ago. And we then had this entire wasteland of nothing but behaviorism all the way up until the 60s. And then we had the explosion of, everything from psychedelics to Eastern forms of spirituality, and slowly a reopening of science to looking at interiors. But it's still taken as, like you say, science tends to look at interiors as a little bit woo-woo and a little bit, not quite to be trusted. But we've made an enormous number of gains over the last couple decades compared to the previous half century, which was just absolutely nothing. So it's with the continuing input of meditation studies and meditation studies using things like CAT scans and PET scans and really sophisticated brain imaging, slowly there's a coming back and an accepting of some of these the realities of these interior states of consciousness, which is extremely important that happen.
Absolutely. And so, I just brought that up because, there's the one objection to all of this is it's not the truth of our group, and it's not been handed down by this guy. And,
right.
And then there's the whole idea of not investigating it yourself and finding out for yourself experientially what's going on. And the other one is just that, it's not objective.
Right.
It's not observable on the outside.
Right.
And I think one of the big contributions you've made is you've really got a lot of people to understand that everyone has a subjective internal experience, and it's just as valid as the objective side of it. It's a different perspective, but it is there and it is valid, and it is repeatable too.
Right. Exactly, and that there are types of interior experiences that are repeatable, that are, in that sense, public, that can be passed on and passed down. And so that is part of the integral approach, integral theory. And we've had some success with people have indeed, scholars have opened up to that idea. And so I've been glad to report that that has had some effect in opening up this frontier.
Well, and there's still plenty of people who are adamant that all of this stuff continues to be woo-woo, but
absolutely.
That's the way things are. Nobody believed Galileo for quite a long time, too. So one other thing I thought we might talk about a little bit, which we've woven into this already, is the idea of practice. Because, I mean, you can read Tolle's, either of his books and follow some of the instructions he gives, and you can get into this now moment. People also, when they listen to someone or read the book or listen to someone like Tolle who's coming from that place, sometimes they almost sort of get what we used to call a contact high back in the 60s and 70s, where they find themselves going into that place. So, I mean, there are ways to get in there, but we want to do more than just sort of have these short visits, and that's where having some sort of a daily practice comes in.
Right.
Because, most people that I talk to about this say, oh, my mind is going all over the place, it's running constantly, so on and so forth. And I know from having done 35 plus years of meditation, it's very possible to get to a place where your mind is not running all the time, where it's pretty much silent unless you decide to use it for something, which is something Tolle discusses. That's the result of practice.
Yes.
This getting into this presence that he talks about is something that's difficult for a lot of people, and it only is something that can happen for a few moments. So having a daily practice is really the doorway to making this something that you really embody for longer and longer periods of time, and it becomes your natural state. So I thought we could just chat about that a little bit here before we wrap things up.
Right. I mean, it is paradoxical in many ways, and the world's mystical traditions are aware of this. And the paradox comes in the fact that that the awareness that's aware of the now moment, the awareness that is one with pure nowness, is known by many names, but it's basically the awakened mind. It's the liberated mind. It's big mind. It's pure awareness. It's consciousness per se. And that pure awareness, that big mind, is in fact ever present. The awareness of that now moment is ever present. And it's something, I mean, people right now, whether they realize it or not, there's sounds are happening around them. They are automatically hearing these sounds. People are hearing the sounds of our voices. You don't have to make any effort. It's coming straight out of the now. You are aware of the now moment right now. That's all you are aware of right now. If you have a thought of yesterday, that thought occurs right now. If you have a thought of tomorrow, that's not tomorrow. That thought of tomorrow occurs right now. The only thing you are ever aware of is the timeless present. And so you don't have to do anything to get into that state. It's not hard to get into that state. It's impossible to avoid.
You can't get out of it.
You can't get out of it. So that's well, on the other hand, there is still, while you are not fully aware of the fact that you are always in it, then it does indeed seem like you're out of it. And so that's the paradox. And it's in Zen, it's called things like the gateless gate, whereas it's something you're going through but not really. And so there's a gate there but not really. And practice is the gateless gate. Practice is what you're going to do to pass through something that you've never really needed to pass through. But without working, without practicing, you still won't fundamentally wake up.